Hi, my name is Sam, and I am 10 years old. I have a dog. His name is White Frank. He is very smart, and his fur is white like snow. I love White Frank. He is my best friend. We live near a big forest. The trees in the forest are tall, and the birds sing all day. I like to play in the forest. White Frank likes to run and bark. One sunny day, I said, "Let's go on an adventure, White Frank." White Frank wagged his tail. He was happy. He always wants to go on adventures. I packed a bag. I put in some bread, cheese, and a bottle of water. I also put in a flashlight and a small map. "Ready?" I asked. White Frank barked, "Woof." We walked into the forest. The trees made shadows on the ground. Birds flew from tree to tree. The air smelled fresh. "This will be fun," I said. White Frank ran ahead, his tail wagging. We walked for a long time. I saw a big butterfly. It had blue and yellow wings. White Frank saw a squirrel. He backed, but the squirrel ran up a tree. "Don't scare the animals, Frank," I said. White Frank wagged his tail. He was happy to be outside. Then, we heard a strange sound. It was like click, click, click. "What is that?" I asked. White Frank stopped. His ears went up. He looked at me. "Let's find out," I said. We followed the sound. It was louder now. Click, click, click. Soon, we saw a small stream. Water flowed over rocks. A frog sat on a rock. The sound was coming from the water. "Look, Frank. It's a fish jumping," I said. A silver fish jumped in the stream. Its tail made the sound. White Frank ran to the stream. He sniffed the water. "Don't get wet, Frank," I said. But White Frank jumped in. Splash! I laughed. "You are so silly." White Frank came out of the water. He shook his fur. Now, I was wet too. We kept walking. The sun was high in the sky. I was hungry. "Let's stop here," I said. I sat on a rock and opened my bag. I gave some bread to White Frank. He ate it fast. I ate my bread and cheese. "Yum," I said. After eating, we started walking again. Soon, we saw a very big tree. "Wow, Frank, this tree is huge," I said. The tree was very tall. Its trunk was wide. I could not see the top. "Let's climb it," I said. White Frank backed. He jumped on a low branch. I climbed up after him. We sat on a high branch. I could see the forest. It was so green. "This is the best adventure," I said. White Frank wagged his tail. After climbing down the big tree, White Frank and I walked deeper into the forest. The trees grew closer together, and the air felt cool. Suddenly, I saw something strange. "Look, Frank. Is that a house?" I asked. In front of us, there was a tiny house. It was made of wood, and it had a red roof. The windows were very small, and smoke came out of the little chimney. "Who lives here?" I wondered. White Frank sniffed the ground. He wagged his tail and barked softly. "Let's see if someone is home," I said. I knocked on the tiny door. Knock, knock. The door opened. A very small woman stood there. She had white hair and glasses. She smiled at me. "Hello, young boy," she said. "What brings you here?" "We are on an adventure," I said. "This is my dog, White Frank." The woman looked at White Frank and laughed. "He is a good dog," she said. "Do you want some tea and cookies?" she asked. "Yes, please," I said. We sat at her tiny table. She gave me a cup of tea and a cookie. White Frank got a little biscuit. Thank you, I said. Your house is very nice. The woman smiled. Be careful in the forest, she said. There is a cave nearby. It can be dangerous. I nodded. We will be careful, I promised. After tea, we said goodbye to the tiny woman and continued our adventure. As we walked, the trees became dark and thick. White Frank stayed close to me. Suddenly, I saw a big rock. Behind it, there was a hole in the ground. Is this the cave? I asked White Frank. He backed. The hole was big enough for us to go inside. I turned on my flashlight. Let's go, Frank, I said. The cave was cold and dark. The flashlight made long shadows on the walls. I heard water dripping. Drip, drip, drip. White Frank sniffed the ground. He found a shiny stone. Wow, Frank, look at this, I said. The stone was blue and sparkled in the light. I put it in my pocket. Suddenly, I heard a noise. It sounded like a growl. What was that? I whispered. White Frank stood still. His ears went up. He growled softly. Then, I saw two glowing eyes. Oh, I said. A big animal came out of the shadows. It was a bear. Run, Frank, I shouted. We ran out of the cave as fast as we could. The bear did not follow us. That was close, I said. White Frank backed. His tail wagged. You are brave, Frank, I said. After the cave, we walked for a long time. The forest became bright again. We found a river. The water was clear and sparkled in the sunlight. This is so pretty, I said. I bent down to touch the water. It was cool and fresh. White Frank drank some water. Then, I noticed something strange. Frank, look, I said. The river had little golden fish swimming in it. The fish glowed like stars. Are these magic fish? I wondered. I put my hand in the water. One fish swam near me. It touched my finger and swam away. Suddenly, I felt happy and strong. Wow, this river is magic, I said. White Frank backed. He jumped into the water and splashed around. Be careful, Frank, I said, laughing. We stayed by the river for a while. It was peaceful and quiet. After leaving the river, we decided to go home. I reached into my bag for the map. Oh no, I said. The map is gone. I looked around. It was not on the ground. Frank, we are lost, I said. White Frank backed. He looked at me and wagged his tail. We need to find the way back, I said. We walked and walked. The forest looked the same everywhere. Which way, Frank? I asked. White Frank sniffed the ground. He started walking. Do you know the way? I asked. White Frank wagged his tail. I followed him. Soon, I saw a familiar tree. This is the big tree we climbed, I said. Good job, Frank. White Frank barked happily.